Hey guys, I'm Stixxay from Golden Guardians, and today I'm going to be doing a Zeri champion guide.
Aye, this is cool. Lots of places to run. Charging up ought to be quick.
I think that most people should try to learn how to play Zeri if they're an AD carry, just because she's really fun to play. She's very mechanically intensive. There's a lot of room for outplaying your opponents, and for anyone who's played against her, it's very frustrating to play against. So I would say Zeri definitely favors the players who try to play really aggressive and like to take risky situations and, you know, just maybe not go for the 100% play every time. I think Zeri is really, if you can push the limits of the champion, she's very powerful. If you're an AD carry and you like to play mechanical champions, then Zeri is definitely a great fit for you, as well as she's going to be OP for a long time. So the Keystone that you should always take on Zeri is Lethal Tempo. It's pretty self-explanatory, but yeah, it's just by far the best Keystone on her, and when you get it fully stacked, it makes her range higher and it synergizes really well with her ulti. For the second one, you can take Triumph or Presence of Mind. I think Triumph is generally pretty good for solo queue because you're going to be fighting a lot and the extra health that comes back can be really useful. Alacrity, because you naturally build Shield Bow as a first item on Zeri, so you don't really need the lifesteal too much, and the extra attack speed is really nice. And then as a third tree, I usually go Cut Down or Coup de Grace. And this will kind of depend on your build, which I'll talk about later, but for this game we'll go Coup de Grace. And then for your secondary tree, I usually like to run Celerity and then Gathering Storm. And I run Celerity because I usually run Ghost on Zeri. That's really common summoner skill on her. So I like Celerity, Gathering Storm. Otherwise, you can also choose to do Resolve second, and you can go something like Conditioning into Overgrowth, just so you're a lot tankier. Or you could go Revitalize if you have some sort of enchanter like Yuumi or Lulu on your team. Summoner spells, I usually think Ghost is probably the best one for team fighting on Zeri. Otherwise, you can just go Heal, which is very normal for AD carries. If they have a lot of CC, you can go Cleanse. Okay, so starting items for Zeri, it's not really anything too crazy from a normal AD carry. Usually Doran's Blade is a pretty safe start. I would say usually go Doran's Blade if it's like a melee support matchup. Otherwise, if they have some poke, you can go Longsword and 3 potions. And if it's a really easy lane, like for example for Sivir, it's really common to go Cull because you just get more gold that way. So Zeri's passive is pretty much she will kind of steal the enemy's shield. So if you're ever versus like an enchanter support, Yuumi, Lulu, that type of stuff, and you hit them with any ability, you'll kind of steal their shield and also get a bit of move speed. Zeri's Q is kind of like her auto attack, so she's pretty different from other AD carries, and you don't really want to right click that much. Your right click kind of charges up as you hit things with your Q. Otherwise, your Q is kind of your auto attack, so you're just spamming Q. It's kind of like if you've ever played a Tracer in Overwatch, it's pretty similar to that. And once they're low enough, your right click will be an execute. So Zeri's W is a laser that just shoots out like this, and if it goes through a wall, it kind of expands and makes it AoE and also crits, so it does more damage through walls. Another thing with her W is you can also kind of shoot it through a Zero Wall, Trundle Pillar, you can shoot it through towers, so pretty much any terrain you can shoot her W through and it'll get the bonus. Zeri's E is just a dash, pretty normal dash, except with her, it makes her Q go AoE for the next 3 autos. So 1, 2, 3. So this is mainly useful when you're clearing waves. Also good for team fights, obviously. Another thing about Zeri's E is that it goes through walls and it'll go to the edge of any wall. So you can pretty much find any point on a wall and it'll go through it. Zeri's ulti is like the main part of her kit. It's what makes her like really, really strong. Pretty much just gives you attack speed and does a big AoE burst, and it'll stack up permanently. And this stacks cause you to get move speed, so you're pretty much just running around forever as long as you can keep these stacks up. And the ulti can continue stacking through creep waves. That's something that a lot of people know. But yeah, just try to keep this up for as long as you can whenever you use it, and try to hit as many people with it as you can. By level 3, you always want your W and E. You start out with your Q, so you don't really have an option there, but on level 2, you can kind of choose whether you want to go W or E. I would generally recommend if you're thinking that you're going to kill the opponent, you can go W level 2. Otherwise, E is always a pretty safe option to kind of just be safer for yourself. In the early lane phase, Zeri is pretty weak, but the reason I think she's strong is because she scales very well into the game, but she's also very hard to punish as a laner. Her Q is just a spammable ability, and you can use it from a decent range. It's just very hard to punish her. She's just constantly using Q. She can kind of just push the wave. And I would say as Zeri, the way you want to play is just constantly be pushing with your Q. You don't need to feel pressured to force any trades on the opponent or do anything like that. And I think the most important thing on Zeri is just realize that your all-in is very weak. So don't get baited even when they're super low, you're gonna have a hard time killing them. And the main reason is because your Q does not go through creeps. So if they're standing on a creep wave or something like that, you're essentially not gonna be able to hit them at all. So yeah, just be really careful with that. Otherwise, just try to farm. That's really your only job as Zeri, because you're a hyper-scaling champ who is gonna do really well in team fights. So yeah, don't need to feel too pressured early. Just keep pushing with Q. The most two common Zeri builds are typically on your first back, you want to try to get Zerker Greaves. And the reason for this is because it reduces her Q cooldown, so you're able to spam your autos more, essentially. You're essentially always going Immortal Shield Bow. This is just like the best item on her. It gives her lifesteal, it gives her survivability and damage. Second, you typically want to go Phantom Dancer, and then Infinity Edge is a very, very normal AD carry build. And then I would say this is good in almost every situation, but there is another build as well. And this one involves going Runon secondary and then going Titanic Hydra third. I think this build is really good if they have some melee damage dealers that you need to survive a bit better. Usually if they have 3+ melee champions, I think this build is really good. Otherwise, just go the normal Phantom Dancer second with Infinity Edge. After the early game and heading into the mid game, typically when you have 1 to 2 items, this is when Zeri really wants to start fighting people. And she's pretty versatile in fights. You can essentially hit the front line as long as you can with your ulti up, or you can just dive the back line. So just remember, you are an AD carry, so don't go too crazy. You still need to, play with your team, but you can do some crazy things on this champion. If you find the right wall, you can kind of go behind the opponent. Otherwise, you can just follow up on your team and just hit the person in front of you. In the late game is probably where Zeri shines the most. So at this point, you're pretty much going to be able to take any team fight, you can kite anyone, and you probably are going to be doing some of the highest damage in the team fights out of anyone in the game. So the main thing is, you just want to put yourself in a safe position to pop your ulti and just keep that thing stacking as long as you can. And if you see a good opportunity to go on their backline, then you can do that. Otherwise, just keep your ulti stacking, and even if your team is losing the fight, you can kind of clutch it out yourself by just, playing on the edge and just not being too scared, just trying to keep your ulti up no matter what. So usually that's why this champion's a little broken. Pretty much if you can make it to this point in the game, you're in a pretty good spot already by just being Zeri at this point. Yeah, just keep your ult stacking and just play the team fights front to back and you'll be fine. The most common Zeri combo, there aren't very many, but the most common one is using your E and W at the same time, and this is going through a wall. And the reason you want to do this is it kind of buffers your W, that by the time your E lands, your W is like coming out of a wall and hitting someone, so they're going to be slowed preemptively. This is really good for chasing people. They're trying to run away from you and you use your E and W. But yeah, this is a very common combo. You're going to use this tens of times per game. So that's the most common one. Another combo you can do is actually your E resets your Q. So this is pretty helpful for early game. You're trying to push a wave. You just sneak in a Q, E, and then keep spamming your Q. Very small, but everything matters. So yeah, just sneak in an extra auto attack before you use your E. Another thing about Zeri's E is pretty much find any point on a wall and it'll go through it. I think one or a couple really helpful ones are from base. You can do one like this. Fly that way. And another one is from your base. You can do it like this. And for me, the easiest way I found to do this quickly was I kind of just click the spot and I just know where the spot is right here. And then I'll just shoot my mouse down the end of where I know it, around where it's going to be, and it just helps you find that angle really fast, because sometimes they can take a while, especially when you're new to the champion. Okay. Something really important about Zeri's Q is it kind of has two parts about it. There's your actual right click, which is your execute, and then there's your Q. So your Q is going to stack up the right click portion of it, and you'll see it with this yellow bar indicator under your health. And pretty much you don't want to use your right click unless the enemy is in an execute range, which will be a number dependent on what level you are. And otherwise, just only use your Q. So try not to use your right click too much. I was definitely doing that a lot when Zeri first came out. And then I realized that all you want to do is just stay in max range with your Q and use your right click when it turns orange, because it's an execute and does the most damage when they're lower health.
Lightning in a gun coming through.
Overall, I think Zeri is one of the strongest AD carries in the game. She's a hyper-scaling AD carry that has a pretty hard to punish early game. So just make sure in the early game you're just farming and you don't force anything too much, just push the wave with your Q. In the mid game, you start looking to fights when you have a couple items, and then if you get to the late game, well then you're lucky because you have a pretty good chance of winning the game. So that was it for my Zeri champion guide. Hope you guys learned a thing or two watching, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. See ya.